Immanuel Wallerstein, thank you very much for being with us today, sir. So exactly 2 years ago, you told RT that the real economic crash is still a couple of years down the line. Is it with us right now?
No, it's a year or two still down the line, but it's very clearly coming.
Well, who is the biggest trouble at this point? The United States, the European Union, or just the rest of the world?
Actually, everybody's in trouble, but the United States is clearly in trouble. The European Union is in trouble. I think it's in less trouble than the United States, but it's in trouble. But I think also that the so-called newly emerging countries, or the emergent countries, Brazil, India, China, are also in trouble. So I don't see anybody who isn't in trouble.
So like you're saying, the global financial system is clearly broken. What is wrong with the modern capitalism?
Oh, that's a very long story. But I mean, modern capitalism has, in my view, but that's a long story, reached the end of its rope, and it cannot survive as a system. And what we are seeing is the structural crisis of the system. So the structural crisis goes on for a long time. It really started, in my view, more or less in the 1970s. It will go on for another 20, 30, 40 years. It's not a crisis of a year or of a short moment. It's a major structural unfolding of a system, and we're in transition to another system. And in fact, the real political struggle that's going on in the world, though most people refuse to recognize it, is not about capitalism, should we have it or should we not have it, but what should replace it. And that, of course, you can have two very different kinds of views on what should replace it.
What's your view?
Well, I would like a more relatively democratic, more relatively egalitarian world. That's one view. We've never had that in the history of the world. It's possible. The other view is that you have a very unequal, polarizing, exploitative system. It doesn't have to be capitalism. Capitalism is that, but you can do that in many other ways, some of which may be far worse than capitalism. So that's the way I see the political struggle. That's technically called a bifurcation of a system.
So the bifurcation of the capitalism system is directly linked to the economic chaos.
Yes, its roots are in many ways the impossibility of continuing the basic principle of capitalism, which is ceaseless accumulation of capital. And that's the whole point of capitalism as a system, and it's worked in some ways marvelously well for 500 years. It's been an extremely successful system in what it has tried to do, but it has undone itself, as all systems do.
But is it dangerous, all this social, economic,
yes,
and
it's
political
enormously
shaking?
dangerous.
Okay, what are the pros and cons?
If you mean, is it dangerous to you and to me? Yes, it's extremely dangerous to you and to me. In fact, in one of my books, I called it Hell on Earth. It's a system in which everything is relatively, in short term, unpredictable. And people cannot live with unpredictability in the short run. We can live with unpredictability in the long run. We can adjust to that. But if you don't know what's going to happen the next day or the next year, then you don't know what to do. And you get paralyzed. And that's basically what we're seeing in the world economy right now, is a paralysis. Nobody's investing, really, because they're not sure that 3 years from now they'll get their money back. So when you're not sure in 3 years from now you'll get your money back, you don't invest. And if you don't invest, that makes the situation even worse. But people don't feel they don't have much choice. And they're right, they don't have too much choice. The options are few.
Yeah, like you said, we are in this shaking process, and it's not a question of pros and cons. We have no choice but to be in it. But do you see a way out?
Well, it's not a question of a way out. What happens in a bifurcation, at some point, the thing tilts. And we get into a new, relatively stable situation. The crisis is over. We're in a new system. But we don't know which one it will be. It's very optimistic in the sense that it matters what you and I do in a way that in the normal workings of a system, it doesn't matter. In the normal workings of the system, right, you put a lot of energy in and everything in the end comes back. Look, we're in Russia. There was something called the Russian Revolution, right? In 1917, there was a revolution. It was an enormous social effort, right? Incredible numbers of people put energy into it, trying to support it in X and Y way. They did incredible things. And in the end, 80 years later, you see, where is Russia in relative to where it was in 1913? In many ways, it's back to where it was, or not that far from where it was. Same thing could be said of the French Revolution, enormous social effort, and after 50 years, were they more than a sort of ripple on a continuous line of change within their country.
So what does that say about that, the importance of the personal choice that you're talking about, that you and me
Well, the point is, the situation changes when you get into the structural crisis. Instead of a lot of effort making small amount of change, basically, a little effort can make an enormous amount of change because the whole thing is so unstable, so volatile, that every little effort pushes it in one direction or another. So I sometimes say this is the historicization of the old Greek philosophical distinction between determinism and free will. When the system is relatively stable, it's a relatively determinist system in which we have relatively little free play. But when it's unstable, when it's going into structural crisis, free will comes into the picture. That is to say, your action and my action really matter in a way that they didn't for 500 years. That's my basic point.
I know that you've always named Karl Marx as one of your biggest influences. Do you think he is still as relevant in 21st century?
Well, look, Karl Marx was a great thinker of the 19th century. He had all the virtues of his insights and all the limitations of being a man of the 19th century. One of his great limitations was that he was too much of a classical economist, and he was too much of a determinist, and he didn't see the fact that systems. He did see that systems come to an end, but he thought they came to an end as a result of a sort of process of conscious revolution. And I'm suggesting they come to an end because of internal contradictions, and everyone is a prisoner of their time. There's no question of that. So he's a prisoner of the fact that he was a 19th century thinker. I'm a prisoner of the fact that I'm a 20th century thinker.
Now 21st century thinker.
Well, I know, but I was formed. I mean, I was born in 1930. I lived 70 years in the 20th century. I feel that I'm a product of the 20th century, and that probably reveals itself in the limitations of my thought.
How much and in what ways do those two centuries differ that you've transited to, from 20th to 21st? Are they really that different?
Well, I think, yes. I think the real turning point was circa 1970. First of all, that was the World Revolution of 1968, a not unimportant event. In fact, I think the most significant event of the 20th century, more important than the Russian Revolution, more important than the U.S. becoming the hegemonic power in 1945 or thereabouts. 1968 broke the liberal illusion that was governing the world system. It announced, in fact, the bifurcation that we're coming into, and we have been living in the wake of 1968 ever since, everywhere.
Well, you're saying ever since then we've been living on the brink of 68. Does that have anything to do with the fact that People often say for the last 2 decades, the world has become more violent and there is more violence.
I think what it is a sense of discomfort, perhaps not measuring the actual reality of discomfort, but there's no question people were relatively calm about violence in 1950s or 60s in a way that they're not calm about it today. Everybody is fearful, and in many ways they have right to be fearful.
But you would still think that with all the progress in technology and with the fact that we like to think we're more civilized, there will be no more wars. What does it say about human nature?
It says about human nature that people are ready to be violent under many, many circumstances. And are we more civilized? I don't know that we're more civilized. That's a kind of dubious concept, in fact. First of all, the civilized cause more trouble than the non-civilized. The civilized try to destroy the barbarians. It's not the barbarians who try to destroy the civilized. The civilized define the barbarians. The others are the barbarians. We are the civilized.
Is this what we're seeing right now? West trying to teach the barbarians all around the world?
Yeah, we've been seeing that for 500 years.
Immanuel Wallerstein, thank you very much for this interview.